My neighbor kept calling the police on me for made-up violations, so I bought his house and evicted him. Moving into my first house at 28 felt like the American dream finally coming true. The suburban neighborhood seemed perfect with its neat lawns and friendly faces, until I met the guy next door who would turn my life into a living nightmare for the next 2 years. It started 3 days after I moved in when I was unloading boxes from my truck in the driveway. The police showed up claiming someone reported me for blocking a fire hydrant, which was complete nonsense since the hydrant was across the street and nowhere near my truck. The officer seemed confused too, apologizing for the weird call before leaving. 2 weeks later, another visit from the boys in blue. This time, the complaint was about loud music during quiet hours, except I had been at work all day and my house was completely silent. The pattern became clear when I noticed my neighbor peeking through his blinds every time the cops showed up. This guy was probably in his 60s, lived alone, and apparently had nothing better to do than make my life miserable. He would call about everything: my grass being too long, my garbage cans being out 12 hours early, my car being parked too close to the property line by 2 inches. The police started recognizing me and would just wave apologetically before doing their required check. The breaking point came when he called claiming I was running some kind of illegal business from my garage. 3 patrol cars showed up during my nephew's birthday party, traumatizing a bunch of 8-year-olds who thought someone was getting arrested. I had to explain to confused parents, while uniformed officers searched my property for non-existent evidence of commercial activity. That night I decided enough was enough and started documenting everything. Every false report, every time the police came out, every interaction with this lunatic neighbor. I kept detailed records with timestamps, photos, and even started recording our conversations when he would approach me with his bogus complaints. The real game changer happened 6 months later when I bumped into an old college buddy at a coffee shop downtown. We got to talking about life, and I mentioned my neighbor's situation as a funny story. His face changed completely when I described the location and the guy's appearance. Turns out my friend worked in real estate and had been trying to buy that exact house for months. The neighbor had been behind on his mortgage payments and was facing foreclosure, but kept refusing all offers because he was too proud to admit his financial problems. My buddy had inside information about the pending foreclosure proceedings. The pieces started falling into place. This guy was probably stressed about losing his home and taking it out on me as some kind of scapegoat. Instead of feeling sorry for him, though, I saw an opportunity for the perfect revenge that would solve both our problems. I asked my friend to connect me with the bank handling the foreclosure. It took some convincing, but they agreed to let me submit an offer once the property went into default. The neighbor had no idea what was coming, and I made sure to keep my mouth shut while continuing to document his harassment. The foreclosure process took another 8 months, during which time he ramped up his false reports even more. I think he sensed something was wrong but couldn't figure out what. The police visits became almost daily, with complaints about everything from my porch light being too bright to my mailbox being positioned incorrectly. One particularly memorable incident involved him calling about suspicious activity because I had received a large package delivery. The cops showed up ready to investigate some kind of drug operation, only to find me assembling a new bookshelf in my living room. Even the officers started rolling their eyes at this point. The day finally came when the bank officially took possession of his property. I had my financing ready and made an offer that same afternoon. Within 2 weeks, I owned both houses on our little corner of the street. The neighbor had been given 30 days to vacate, but nobody had told him who the new owner was. I waited until day 29 to knock on his door. The look on his face when he saw me standing there with the deed in my hand was absolutely priceless. He went through all the stages of grief in about 30 seconds: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally a weird kind of acceptance. He tried to convince me that we could work something out, that he had learned his lesson and would stop bothering me. I listened politely while he made his case, then handed him the official eviction notice with a smile. He had 24 hours to be completely out. The next day, I watched from my window as he loaded his belongings into a rented moving truck. No more false police reports, no more harassment, no more peeking through blinds. Just blessed silence and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes karma needs a little human assistance. I decided to rent out his former house to a nice young couple with 2 kids. They keep their lawn immaculate and have never once called the authorities about imaginary violations. The husband even helped me fix my fence last month, which was probably the first positive neighbor interaction I had experienced in over 2 years. The whole experience taught me that sometimes the best revenge is not getting mad, but getting even through completely legal means. I never broke any laws, never stooped to his level of petty harassment, and never even raised my voice during our final conversation. Justice served cold with a side of mortgage paperwork. Looking back, I almost feel sorry for the guy. He was probably just a lonely, bitter person who took his frustrations out on the nearest target. But after 2 years of false accusations and police visits, my sympathy well had run completely dry. Actions have consequences, and he learned that lesson the hard way. The funny thing is, I never actually wanted to be a landlord. I had planned to eventually sell the second house, but the rental income has been nice and the tenants are great. Sometimes life pushes you in directions you never expected, and occasionally those directions lead to perfect poetic justice. The neighborhood has been peaceful ever since. No more patrol cars in my driveway, no more explaining myself to confused officers, no more walking on eggshells around my own property. I can finally enjoy the house I worked so hard to buy without constantly looking over my shoulder. My advice to anyone dealing with a nightmare neighbor: document everything, stay calm, and remember that patience sometimes leads to opportunities you never saw coming. The system works if you work within it, and sometimes the best revenge is simply outlasting the person trying to bring you down. These days, when I pull into my driveway after work, I smile knowing that both houses on my corner are filled with reasonable people who understand basic neighborly respect. It took almost 3 years, but I finally got the peaceful suburban life I originally moved here to find. The police in my area probably missed the excitement of their daily visits to investigate imaginary crimes. I should send them a thank you card for being so professional despite the obvious waste of their time. They never made me feel like the bad guy, even when the calls became ridiculously frequent. Sometimes I drive past the apartment complex where my former neighbor ended up living. Part of me wonders if he learned anything from the experience, or if he is already making some other poor person's life miserable with his endless complaints and false accusations. Hopefully he found some peace in his new situation. The whole ordeal reminded me why I love living in America, where property rights are protected and justice can be served through proper legal channels. No vigilante nonsense needed, just patience, documentation, and a little bit of strategic thinking when opportunity knocked. I still have all those records from the 2 years of harassment, stored in a file cabinet just in case I ever need them again. Probably overkill at this point, but old habits die hard, and I learned the importance of keeping detailed documentation when dealing with unreasonable people. The house he used to live in has been completely renovated by my tenants, who got my permission to paint and update the landscaping. It looks better now than it ever did when he lived there, which feels like the final chapter in this ridiculous saga. New paint, new people, new energies. Every once in a while, I get a random police visit about some minor complaint, but they are always legitimate issues that get resolved quickly. Real problems with real solutions, not the fantasy violations that used to bring officers to my door multiple times per week. What a concept! The best part is that I never have to see his face again or deal with his bizarre accusations. The peace of mind that comes with knowing your neighbor is not actively trying to ruin your life is something most people take for granted. I definitely do not anymore. Looking back, buying his house was probably the most satisfying purchase I have ever made. Not because of the property itself, but because of what it represented. The end of harassment, the restoration of peace, and proof that sometimes good things happen to people who stay patient and play by the rules. This whole experience turned me into a much more strategic thinker. Instead of just reacting emotionally to problems, I learned to step back, assess the situation, and look for creative solutions that might not be immediately obvious. Life lessons come in the strangest packages sometimes. I still laugh when I think about that final conversation on his doorstep. The complete shock and disbelief on his face, when he realized that his new landlord was the same person he had been tormenting for 2 years. Karma delivered with a mortgage statement and a smile. The neighborhood kids now use both front yards for their games, and I love watching them play without worrying about some cranky old guy calling the authorities about normal childhood activities. Children laughing and having fun instead of tiptoeing around an unreasonable adult who saw problems where none existed. My new tenants have become genuine friends, and we often barbecue together on weekends. They bring their kids over to swim in my pool, and I help them with home improvement projects. This is what neighborly relationships should look like, mutual respect, cooperation, and genuine care for each other's well-being. The whole saga has become something of a legend in my social circle. Friends love hearing about how I turned the tables on my tormentor through perfectly legal means. It has inspired a few of them to stand up to their own difficult neighbors, though hopefully their situations will not require such dramatic solutions. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had just moved away instead of fighting back. He probably would have driven off the next owner too, continuing his pattern of harassment and false reports. By staying and finding a way to remove him from the equation, I may have saved future residents from the same nightmare. The financial aspect worked out better than expected too. The rental income from his former house covers most of my mortgage payment, essentially giving me a heavily subsidized home. Revenge that pays for itself is the best kind of revenge, and I get a monthly reminder of my victory every time the rent check arrives. The police department probably saved thousands of dollars in wasted resources once the false reports stopped. All those officers, all that time, all those ridiculous investigations into non-existent crimes. The taxpayers of my city should thank me for eliminating such an obvious waste of public resources. I have become something of a local expert on dealing with problem neighbors, and people sometimes ask me for advice. My answer is always the same. Document everything, stay within the law, and remember that patience combined with opportunity can lead to solutions you never imagined possible. The story has a happy ending for everyone, except the guy who caused all the trouble in the first place. My new tenants love their home, I love my peaceful neighborhood, and the police love not having to respond to bogus calls. Win-win-win, except for the loser who created the problem.